Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns they're going to be selling in their upcoming September of 2017 premiere auction. And today we're taking a look at a massively oversized pistol. This is an LAR Grizzly. This is basically an oversized and scaled up 1911 pistol chambered for the .45 Winchester Magnum cartridge. You might ask, why? Well, that's a good question, and the answer to that question is, well, they only made 15,000 of them over the course of about 15 years. These went into production in 1983. They ceased production in 1998. You can actually basically still get parts for them, which is impressive, but there are three main markets for a gun like the Grizzly here. Number one is handgun hunting. If you want to be able to take serious game with a very powerful cartridge, but you want a handgun, well, usually the answer is a revolver, but there are a small number of magnum caliber automatics like the Grizzly that suit that role quite well. Number two is competition, primarily metallic silhouette competition. This is often also done with large bore revolvers, but again, guns like the Grizzly are suitable for it. And the reason that something like this is appropriate for that type of competition is metallic silhouette involves knocking down steel silhouette targets. There are actually standardized silhouettes of 4 different animals at between 50 and 200 yards. So to be able to knock down a steel target effectively and reliably at 200 yards requires a pretty potent cartridge if you're shooting a pistol. You want something that, even if you get like an edge hit, will still knock the target over cleanly so that you don't have to, so your shot doesn't count as a miss and you don't have to take another one. And of course, the third market are people who just want a ridiculously oversized pistol, where the Grizzly clearly suits that as well. Now, this design was initially put together by a guy named Perry Arnett, and my understanding is his initial prototype was a Colt 1911 that, or rather 2 of them, that were chopped and spliced together to make a bigger gun for a bigger cartridge. The .45 Winchester Magnum cartridge has a 30mm long case. That's 50% again as long as the .45 ACP. It is dimensionally on the outside, basically just a lengthened .45 ACP. However, internally it's not based on the same case because the case walls are substantially thicker. The standard maximum pressure for .45 auto is 18,000 psi. For .45 Winchester Magnum, it's 40,000 psi, so more than twice the pressure. And you get a substantial improvement in cartridge ballistics as well. The .45 auto would fire a 230 grain bullet at 850 feet per second. .45 Win Mag, and numbers vary. A lot of Winchester Magnum cartridges are hand-loaded and people have their own recipes that they like to follow, but a pretty typical loading would be 230 grains at 1,450 feet per second. So almost double the velocity of .45 auto. You're talking over 800 foot-pounds of energy, which is a lot coming out of a pistol. For the non-American folks, that would be a 15-gram bullet fired at 450 meters per second. So again, a lot of energy coming out of a pistol. Now, this is a standard, actually it's a very nice Colt 1911, and for a size comparison, there's the Grizzly. It is substantially larger. The most notable place is the length of the grip because it has to accommodate the larger cartridge, but the slide is longer, the barrel is a little bit longer, everything's just beefed up in general to handle this much more powerful cartridge. Standard barrel length, the slide on here is a 5.5-inch slide, and a 5.5-inch barrel was kind of the standard. You could also get a 6.5-inch barrel that just extended out in front of the slide. And then Grizzly, or LAR, actually manufactured 8 and 10-inch long slide conversions or models as well. There's a comparison of the 2 magazines. Obviously, .45 Winchester Magnum is a massively huge cartridge. In fact, interestingly, you can see that as well here. This is a .45 Win Mag magazine for the Grizzly. This is a .45 ACP magazine for the Grizzly. You can see they have a pretty hefty spacer in the back of the magazine body just to make it fit the much shorter .45 ACP. its hugeness aside, the Grizzly is mechanically identical to a 1911, just scaled up. In fact, in a clever design choice, a lot of the small parts in the Grizzly are actually completely interchangeable with the standard 1911. Things like the magazine release parts and the grip safety and a bunch of the fire control parts in the back. The trigger is of course different because it has to be longer, and then obviously the slide, the extractor, the ejector, those parts are different. But a lot of the little small stuff is just straight off the shelf 1911, which makes a lot of sense for manufacture, and it's also very helpful for people who own these guns today when the company is, well, when they're not really producing the guns anymore. Couple things we can point out here. The serial number is an A prefix, which means it's a Mark I gun. They made a total of about 15,000 Grizzlies between 1983 and 1998. The substantial majority of them are Mark I guns, like this one. Mark I indicated that it was a blued finish. There was also a Mark II, which was Parkerized and a little bit cheaper. A Mark I, when they came out, was going to cost you something like $675. And if you wanted a fancy stainless gun or a fancy shiny finish, conversion kits, extra parts, you could easily drop $1,000 on a Grizzly in the 1980s, which was quite a lot of money. The other two common marks that you will see around are the Mark IV and Mark V, and those are guns that were offered specifically in .44 Magnum and .50 Action Express calibers. The Mark I was designed for .45 Winchester Magnum, and then fairly quickly became offered as a multi-caliber pistol with the various conversion kits. So right off the bat, it was offered also in .357 Magnum and .45 ACP. They then also would release later on the 10mm automatic conversion, a 9mm Winchester Magnum conversion. I believe there was also a Wildcat of 357/45 GWM, and that was basically .45 Win Mag necked down to .357. Here's an example of one of the conversion kits. This is the 10mm kit, which actually comes with this pistol. If we take a look in here, this is going to include a barrel bushing and a barrel. Obviously you need the barrel, and then the outside diameter of the barrel is going to be a little different, so you get a barrel bushing. You have a magazine for 10mm. There we go. And you'll notice a couple changes to this magazine. It has a spacer in the back because 10mm is a much shorter cartridge. And then it also has a little crimp up here on the feed lips because the 10mm is also a narrower cartridge than the various .45 calibers. Then down in here, you're also going to get an ejector, an extractor, and a recoil spring, which are all set up for 10mm. So a pretty good comprehensive conversion kit there. Did I mention that these are really huge pistols? Because they're really huge pistols. The grip is mainly the grip length. This thing is just so long that it can be, honestly, a little difficult to get a solid grip on. However, as long as you can handle and deal with that, the Grizzly was a remarkably nice pistol. This was in many ways better than some of the other Magnum automatics on the market at the time because it was based on a very well-proven system, the 1911. And these were produced as high-end pistols, not just expensive Magnums, but really good pistols in general. So they were quite accurate out of the box. They're really quite smooth to operate, although you have to deal with a 27-pound mainspring. They have a reputation for being quite reliable. The triggers on them right out of the box are really quite nice. I mean, it's a very light trigger, really quite crisp. You get ambidextrous safety out of the box. It's, you know, they didn't cheap out on these. They actually did these quite well, and that's part of the reason they are popular, and I think it's part of the reason that they are, if I had my choice of Magnum automatics, while something like a Wildie is a mechanically interesting and neat gun, if I actually wanted to shoot something like this, the Grizzly would probably be my go-to choice. My understanding is that these went out of production in 1998 out of a potential fear over lawsuits. Around that time, there was kind of a trend in the US of people attempting to sue handgun companies, handgun manufacturers, over crimes committed with handguns, No one ever did that with the Grizzly, but LAR apparently stopped production out of fear of that, and when they decided, okay, this trend isn't really something we have to worry about, it's not going to affect us, they went to put the gun back into production, and their insurance company had tripled their liability rates because they're making handguns. And at that point, it just wasn't worth it to them to put this thing back into production, and so they didn't. I believe they're actually still in business making parts, although it seems that they're not making magazines, because magazines for these things are quite expensive and a bit scarce to find. Of course, there are a bunch of different calibers of magazines depending on what cartridge the gun is chambered in that you're trying to find a magazine for. Anyway, this particular one, kind of cool, is actually set up for 3 different cartridges. As you see it right now, it's in 45 Win Mag, and then being sold here at Rock Island, it's also coming with a 10mm conversion kit and a 45 ACP conversion kit, and a couple of mags for each cartridge. So pretty cool, you get a nice complete kit. If you'd be interested in having that kit, of course, it is coming up for sale here in the second weekend of September, I believe. If you take a look at the description text below, you'll find a link to Rock Island's catalog page on this LAR Grizzly package. You can take a look at their pictures and description and see all of the contents of everything that's coming with the gun. And if you decide you want it, you can place a bid over the phone or through the website or live here at the auction in person. Thanks for watching.